So you're talking about industry-wise, we just first have to look at what exactly forms the smart city, right? So in smart cityscape, typically you have the smart homes, you have the smart commercial estates, you have your smart industrial plants, as well as you're talking about transportation-wise, logistics-wise. So these are the areas that you can actually see a lot of development going on. So when you're talking about which sector, typically I would downsize it to things like industrial, smart industrial, 4.0. You're talking about logistics, smart logistics. You have like smart construction, as well as F&B, where they are doing a lot of automation and robotics to speed up the process and productivity. So these are typically the type of sectors you see a lot of the so-called adoption of smart technology. And in terms of country-wise, in ASEAN, of course, Singapore is the one of the key countries that's leading forward with a lot of this smart city development. We may not be a huge country where we have a lot of big cities to develop, but we're actually creating a lot of this small micro smart town, smart city. So typically you'll see in ASEAN itself, a lot is driven by Singapore. We have some with Philippines as well. They're working on a couple of smart city projects. Then Indonesia, as well as Malaysia. So these are the key countries that are pushing a lot for this kind of so-called smart initiative. So typically, when you're talking about smart initiative or adopting of new technology, right? If you look at the reference on globally, how things are being driven is a lot driven by the government sector. So in terms of regulation, whether there are any government grants, how much is the government actually leading in terms of their own projects? Are they adopting smart technology in their own projects to actually lead the way for the private companies to follow suit? Are there any like standard regulations that they need to comply? For instance, the building needs to be greener, more sustainable, before the authorities can approve the permit for building the buildings. So a lot, I would say, globally, in fact, is driven by government initiatives. So for instance, in Singapore, there's a lot of grants have been made available for companies to adopt smarter technology. And there is the green mark criteria where they're talking about the building has to be, especially if it's a non-residential building, it needs to be green, it needs to be more sustainable. You need to comply to a certain green mark rating, we call it. And on top of that, you're talking about countries like, technology where you can actually enhance productivity, reduce the reliance on manpower, and how it can, moving forward, is not only just on the building site stage, you're talking about operational stage as well. The building needs to be sustainable for the long run. It needs to, how do you make use of technology to enhance the facility management, for instance? Isn't the preference from which country is it from. In fact, you're talking about smart technology, right? A lot is driven by, you have your tech startups. So in Singapore, you have a lot of tech startups being set up here. At the same time, major companies, they themselves are moving towards to this smart city development. So in some instances, where I say it doesn't really matter which country it's from, as long as it has that solution that is readily available and has proven to have immediate benefits, that would be the best case scenario for a lot of the real estate developers to adopt a technology like this. Because the first thing first is that they need to justify in terms of the return on investment, how much cost is involved. So these are things, if you can justify that you can get your returns soon, at the same time, it helps the real estate developers realize, or rather comply to certain government standards or requirements, and all the more the adoption for such technology will be a lot easier. And because at the end of the day, it's all about profit and loss, right? So if a technology is proven to be effective and is not that costly to adopt, and it's not something that's totally new that they are totally not familiar with, then there's a higher tendency for them to adopt the technology in the building itself. Because apart from profit and loss, you're talking about marketing as well. So they want to be able to, because as a real estate developer, if I'm developing a building for residential, then that technology or smart technology must enhance to get consumers to buy their property. When you're talking about, let's say, developing for a commercial estate, then it needs to give the justification for the ultimate tenant who's renting the building, that this building is like, environmentally friendly, and more in the sense of like energy saving. So they know they're not going to be built unnecessarily with those high energy usage and stuff like that. One of the good case study or example is the Tengah Smart Town that's developed by the HDB. So HDB is the Housing Development Board of Singapore. They actually develop, their primary purpose is to create public residential development in Singapore. So they pretty much own 80% of the residential development in Singapore. At the same time, what they do is that they actually have certain types of projects where they develop like smart towns, mixed developments. So it's, again, they are creating the standards for the private sector to follow suit. So the Tengah is actually one of the smartest town that right now they are developing. So what you see in this smart town is that their ultimate goal for the design of this whole smart town is to go car light. In fact, what they're trying to term is car-free town. So you start seeing like roads, cars, all these will be traveling under the town itself. So it frees up all the space on the surface, ground surface, for pedestrians and even for sports activities and stuff like that. So you reduce a lot of like the traffic flow on the surface. And you're also talking about certain features like smart lighting, smart energy management system. They're even looking to things like smart energy storage system. So reducing the reliance on the power grid so that the town itself can be self-sustainable. And if you do notice that this town where it's located is actually at the western region of Singapore, where it's a bit more close to nature. So they try not to change too much of that concept, trying to retain as much of nature as it was originally is, and coexist together with humans, with nature. That's the whole concept of the whole smart town. And they're also talking about technology like automated waste management system. So it's an entire pneumatic waste system where all the waste can be automatically collected through this entire pneumatic waste system that they are working on. So again, is to reduce the reliance of like physical manpower to go there to physically collect and compile all the waste. Right now, everything can be automated.